Ladies and gentlemen of the United States Air Force, Airmen a note.
A tisket, a tasket, a brown and yellow basket. I sent a letter to my mommy, and on the way I dropped it. I dropped it, I dropped it. Yes, on the way I dropped it. A little girlie picked it up and put it in her pocket. She went trucking on down the avenue without a single thing to do. She went peck, peck, pecking all around. When she spied it on the ground, she took it, my little yellow basket. And if she doesn't bring it back, I think that I will die. A tisket, a tasket, I lost my yellow turn it, don't know what I'll do. Oh, gee, I wonder where my basket can be.
So do we, so do we, so do we, so do we, so do we.
Oh, gee, I wish that little girl I could see.
So do we, so do we, so do we, so do we, so do we.
Oh, why was I so careless with that basket of mine? That itty bitty basket was a joy of mine. A tisket, a tasket, I lost my yellow basket. Won't someone help me find my basket and make me happy again, again?
Was it great?
No, 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 no.
Was it red?
No, 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 no. No, 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 no. Just a little yellow basket. A little yellow basket. Thank you so much. Woo. Thanks.
All right, here we go. One, two.
I want to shout a poem about how I dream of that gleam in your eye. I want to shout, but all that comes out is my mind. I want to sing of flowers in spring, but oh dear, when you're near, I just die. And though I try, the best I can sigh is my mind. I should say, oh, how lovely. I should say, oh, how sweet. I should have Shakespeare at the tip of my tongue. But every time we meet, I look at you, and what can I do? I get weak, I can't speak, I just die. And though I try, the best I can sigh is my mind.
Ladies and gentlemen, the United States Air Force, Airmen of Note. Let's hear it for them again. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special treat for you today. All the way from England, we have the pipes and drums of the Queen's Scott Guards. The English Army are with us here today to salute our World War II veterans. Let's hear it for them.
We're going to play a little bit more pre-game. Yeah, I just have to see how long the set is.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Queen Scott Guards, let's hear from them, all the way from England. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We'll have one more selection from the airmen to note, and then we'll start our ceremonies. Thank you. Let's hear it one more time for the United States Air Force Band, Airmen of Note. At this time, we ask everybody to get off the main plaza, please. We are ready to start our ceremony.
Ladies and gentlemen, today is a historic day, not just for Americans, but for the whole world. Here to celebrate with us are representatives from the embassies of dozens of European nations. Please welcome our friends of the European Diplomatic Corps. On this special day, we would like to recognize and honor our allies who fought side by side with us throughout World War II. Without their support, sacrifice, and unity of achieving peace, much more devastation would have occurred. It is my pleasure to now welcome our allied countries who helped save the world: United Kingdom, Ukraine, Turkmenistan, South Africa, Slovakia, Russia, Poland, Norway, New Zealand, Netherlands, Republic of Moldova, Malta, Luxembourg, Kyrgyz Republic, Kazakhstan, Greece, Georgia, France, Denmark, Czech Republic, Canada, Brazil, Belgium, Belarus, and Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, the Master of Ceremonies for today's commemoration is Mr. Alex Kershaw. Mr. Kershaw attended University College, Oxford, where he studied politics, philosophy, and economics. He taught history before working as a journalist for several British newspapers, including The Guardian, The Independent, and The Sunday Times. He is the author of several popular books on World War II, including The Bedford Boys, The Story of Bedford, Virginia's Extraordinary D-Day Sacrifice, and The Longest Winter. His most recent book, The Liberator, one World War II soldier's 500-day odyssey from the beaches of Sicily to the gates of Dachau, tells the story of Texas-born Felix Sparks, an officer in the 157th Infantry Regiment of the 45th Infantry Division, who participated in 4 amphibious invasions in Europe and commanded the Thunderbird unit that liberated Dachau on 29 April 1945. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our honor to have with us today Mr. Alex Kershaw.
Thank you. Good morning. And what a beautiful day it is today. On behalf of the Friends of the National World War II Memorial Board of Directors and the National Park Service, welcome to the National World War II Memorial. It is my great honor to be your Master of Ceremonies this morning as we commemorate and remember the 70th anniversary of VE Day. We are here today to salute those of the World War II generation who helped save the world from tyranny. We also offer a special salute to the men and women of our armed services who are fighting the war on terror. We want them to know that their service is deeply, deeply appreciated. To all of these warriors and veterans, past and present, we owe a debt of gratitude and our lasting appreciation for their service to this country. Again, thank you all for being here today, and a special thanks to our World War II veterans for your service and your sacrifices for this nation and the world. We owe everything to you. Everything. Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to introduce the official party for today's VE Day commemoration. Our keynote speaker for today's event is Ambassador Susan Rice. I am also delighted to welcome, on behalf of her sister, former Secretary of State, the Honorable Madeleine Albright, Kathy Silver. And the Acting Superintendent of the National Mall and Memorial Parks National Park Service, Ms. Karen Cucurullo. The Chairman of the Board for Friends of the National World War II Memorial, Mr. Josiah Bunting III. From the Military District of Washington, Chaplain Colonel Gary R. Studniewski. Thank you all for being here to commemorate this very special day at the World War II Memorial. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the presentation of the colors, the playing of the national anthem. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the invocation that will be given by Chaplain Colonel Gary R. Stuniewski.
Let us pray. Almighty God, today we gather to commemorate the end of a great tyranny that threatened not only America, but the world. We also remember and give thanks for the men and women who served at a critical time, both home and on very troubled and distant shores and lands, who sacrificed so much to achieve, yes, victory over an enemy, but also helped establish a new unity and peace among global allies, neighbors, friends. Lord, we give you thanks, grateful that you strengthen so many countrymen in unselfish service, military, civilian, family members, prisoners, many making the ultimate sacrifice. We commemorate at this memorial all those whose courage and valor helped to preserve the freedoms we enjoy today, and who continue to provide an inspiration to those of us who strive to add our own contributions to the security, prosperity, and peace of our beloved countries. Bless our commemoration here and all its participants. May this observance render honor to those we remember and foster true devotion to you, to our countries, and to the divine and universal values of freedom, of justice, and of peace we hold so dear. Amen.
Please be seated. It's wonderful to be here today, even under this midday sun. I'm now extremely delighted to be able to introduce our keynote speaker today, a great American stateswoman. Ladies and gentlemen, the National Security Advisor for the United States of America, Ambassador Susan Rice. Ambassador Rice received her PhD in International Relations from New College, Oxford University, England, where she was a Rhodes Scholar. Ambassador Rice served in the Clinton administration in various capacities, including Special Assistant to the President and Senior Director for African Affairs from 1995 to 1997. From 2002 to 2009, she was a Senior Fellow at the Brookings Institution, where she focused on US foreign policy, transnational security, threats, weak states, global poverty, and development. From January 2009 until assuming the role of National Security Advisor in July 2013, Ambassador Rice served as the US Permanent Representative to the United Nations and a member of President Obama's cabinet. At the United Nations, she worked to advance US interests, defend universal values, strengthen the world's common security and prosperity, and promote respect for human rights. Please, please give a very warm welcome to Ambassador Susan Rice.
Good morning, everyone. Alex, thank you so much for that generous introduction. Thank you, members of the Diplomatic Corps, for joining us. Thank you to all of our beloved and distinguished veterans. The message, when it came at last, was simple. The mission of this allied force was fulfilled. At 0241 local time, May 7th, 1945, signed Eisenhower. There was no paean to victory, no exultation. Too much had been lost for that. Too much remained to be done. When President Truman addressed the nation, even as he proclaimed that the flags of freedom fly all over Europe, he reminded all Americans of those priceless lives that were rendered as a sacrifice to redeem our liberty. As the news spread and people poured into the streets to celebrate in New York, London, and Paris, cheers and laughter mixed freely with tears. And even in the midst of one triumph, we vowed to fight on and finish the war in the Pacific. Ladies and gentlemen, 70 years after that great turning point in the history of our world, we remember the sacrifice that was made to preserve freedom. Those who laid down their lives for a better future. The Americans who won the beachhead at Normandy, inch by bloody inch. From Britain, the few who defied the Luftwaffe. The Free French who never accepted Nazi occupation. The brave Poles who fought for our freedom and yours. The Canadian regiments who pushed across France into northern Germany. The resistance movements in every European country. And in the East, the people of Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and all the former Soviet states who endured many of the heaviest losses of the war. But today we can also celebrate without reserve the legacy of their accomplishments, a legacy that could not yet be imagined in 1945 with the trauma of war so fresh. Not just a Europe that has known 7 decades of peace and growing prosperity, but the way the seed of democracy has flourished around the world. The lasting bonds that unite Europe and the United States. The international institutions that have underwritten peaceful development. The continual reaffirmation of those basic principles which formed our alliance, that all men and all women of all lands should be able to live free from fear and want. When American and Soviet troops met in Torgau, Germany in April of 1945, they met not only as victors in war, but as witnesses to some of history's most unconscionable crimes. Hardened soldiers were sickened by the horrors of Dachau and Auschwitz. As one world, we proclaimed, never again. And that legacy continues to drive us to stand against atrocities and acts of mass inhumanity. On the home front, the war helped unleash movements toward greater equality for all people, as women stepped into factories to keep America's industries pumping and joined auxiliary services. Platoons of white and black GIs fought side by side on the fields of Europe. And then black servicemen, like my father's Tuskegee Airmen, came back here to demand justice in their own land. We honor all those brave men and women, those who fell and those who survived, including the proud veterans who are here with us today. We owe each of you an unpayable debt. And on behalf of President Obama, let me reaffirm the enduring gratitude of the American people. The story of your generation will never be forgotten. We will continue to tell it to children blessedly untouched by war, so that they understand, as this memorial reminds us, the price of freedom. We will continue to mark the passing of anniversaries like this one, so that memory never fades into complacency towards the evils in our world. We will carry on the march towards a world of greater rights and opportunities, so that all men and women can live their lives with the basic human dignity that your generation fought for. Because while one mission was fulfilled in 1945, the cause of defending freedom is never finished. As President Truman put it, we must work to bind up the wounds of a suffering world, to build an abiding peace, a peace rooted in justice and in law. That is the pledge we make again today and every day. And no matter how difficult the challenges that lie ahead or what obstacles arise, we will never abandon this struggle. Because for all that has changed during the last 70 years, one thing never will. The United States of America will always stand shoulder to shoulder with the people of the world on the side of liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much.
We are privileged to have with us today, very privileged, the United States Air Force Band, the Airmen of Note, who will now perform a musical salute to all of our veterans here today.
We walk with a different step, and we talk with a different voice, and we love with a tender heart, and we give with open arms. I believe every step that I take is my freedom that you can't take away. I believe in all the blood, sweat, and tears shed to give to the world all these years. We cry for the heroes we lose in the fight, for the freedom to choose, and they die with honor and dignity. So fly your flag way up high. I believe every step that I take is my freedom that you can't take away. I believe in all the blood, sweat, and tears shed to give to the world all these years. All these years.
Representing the National Park Service is the Acting Superintendent, the National Mall and Memorial Parks National Park Service, Ms. Karen Cucurullo.
Good morning. I'm Karen Cucurullo. I'm the Acting Superintendent at the National Mall and Memorial Parks. On behalf of the National Park Service, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the World War II Memorial on the 70th anniversary of the victory in Europe. In his VE Day proclamation issued 70 years ago today, President Harry Truman made note of our arms of liberation who restored freedom to the suffering people of Europe. We are deeply honored and delighted today to welcome several hundred members of that army, the valiant soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who fought on that continent. Please give them a warm welcome. Thank you. We are also honored to have among our speakers, as you heard, the United States National Security Advisor, Susan Rice, and we are honored to have Catherine Silva, sister of former Secretary of State of Dr. Madeleine Albright. Thank you both for being here with us today. I'd also like to recognize Joshua Bunting, who has served our nation for nearly 50 years in the Marine Corps and Army. He was an educator at a number of military and civilian schools. He now serves as our chairman of the Friends of the National World War II Memorial, our partner in sponsoring today's ceremony. And I would like to recognize the 25 representatives of the Allied nations that are here this morning, representing, as Franklin Roosevelt called them, the mass-angered forces of common humanity that marched together 70 years ago. We're deeply appreciative of your presence today to mark the occasion and honor the veterans of that conflict. The National Park Service is proud to be the steward of the legacy as we are the caretakers of the World War II Memorial. For this memorial is not merely a granite and marble monument to the men and women who fought and struggled and ultimately were victorious. This memorial reminds us that the extraordinary things can come from people with otherwise ordinary lives. It helps us understand the monumental trials and sacrifices that have shaped our nation, our government, and society. Our National Park Service rangers, volunteers, maintenance workers, and conservators, and many other specialists try every day to repay their sacrifices in some small way by caring for this wonderful memorial and preserving their memory against the tides of time, and we are honored to be entrusted with its care. And I can promise you that we will be here every day of every year, watching over this place, to keep it, to protect it, to pass on the stories of the heroism and sacrifices, of your heroism and sacrifices to the future generations of America. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Here with us today to represent the ceremony's co-host, the Friends of the National World War II Memorial, is the chairman of the Board for Friends, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Josiah Bunting III.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a singular honor to be here today and share this joyous occasion with you. The Friends of the National World War II Memorial were brought into being a decade ago, and our mission, working with the National Park Service, is to preserve in all of its elemental purity and enormous consequence this holy place. I would like to say only 2 or 3 sentences. First of all, 16.4 million Americans wore the uniform of our country between 1941 and 1945. 16.4 millions. The equivalent today would be approximately 42.5 million in uniform. God bless you. When the war ended at ceremonies in the Pentagon, the head of the Army, George Marshall, thanked and congratulated and praised that great generation. And he quoted Winston Churchill, who said, "Succeeding generations must not be allowed to forget their sacrifice and what they have done for us." One of the reasons we admire and love that generation so much is not only what they did for us between 1941 and 1945, but the example of how they have lived their lives since then. That is the greatness and grandeur of that generation. And as the silent artillery of time gradually erodes their numbers, it is so important for us to act as evangelists in their behalf so that school children, high school children, college students know their history and know what their debt to them is. God bless all of you, especially members of the greatest generation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I know that everyone here, me in particular, appreciate what you have done and what the board of the memorial have done, what the Friends of the National World War II Memorial does every single day to continue to thank and honor our World War II veterans and their families. Thank you very much. Today, 70 years ago, the world learned of the German final surrender. There were euphoric celebrations in many capitals to mark the end of the most destructive war in Europe's very bloody history. While civilians embraced around the world, some infantrymen, some ordinary soldiers, brutalized and exhausted, sat alone with their grief 70 years ago today. They sat in mournful silence. They knew the true price of victory. Some 138,000 young Americans would never see these shores again. Audie Murphy, the most decorated US soldier of the war, who had fought all the way from North Africa to Germany, wrote, "There is VE Day without, but no peace within." Europe lay in ruins. The cost of the conflict was beyond comprehension. Tens of millions dead. But barbarism had been defeated. Nazi genocide had been halted. Democracy could be restored. The men of evil, Winston Churchill declared, are now prostrate before us. This afternoon, 70 years ago, Churchill stepped onto a balcony in London. He could barely hear himself speak, so loud were the cheers of the crowd. "This is your victory," he shouted. "It is the victory of the cause of freedom in every land. In all our long history, we have never seen a greater day than this." I am but one of many millions who have grown up in a Europe that has been united, democratic, and mostly prosperous. A Europe that the veterans here set free. Mine and other generations have, since VE Day, enjoyed the most peaceful period in Europe's history. Thank you. Today, while remembering those who made the ultimate sacrifice, all of us, from all of the Allied nations, can still joyously agree with Churchill. In all our long histories, we have yet to see a greater day than VE Day. I think we would now like to hear from the band once more, please. Thank you very much. While I organize my notes. Thank you. I would like to now come to our next speaker. Secretary Albright is deeply sorry that she could not be with us here today. Instead, she's asked her sister, Kathy Silver, to deliver her remarks on her behalf. I would ask you to give a very warm welcome to Kathy, please.
Thank you. I'm very honored to be here today and to be able to convey my sister's most heartfelt feelings at this very important occasion. She is so disappointed that she couldn't be here personally and share the following remarks with you. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the diplomatic community, beloved veterans of World War II, I am deeply honored to join you in commemorating a monumental victory and celebrating those who fought and bled to achieve it. In doing so, I speak to you not as a former Secretary of State, but as someone whose own life is deeply intertwined with the events we reflect upon today. That is because I was born in Czechoslovakia only 2 years before Hitler's troop marched into Prague. My father was a diplomat and at the time subject to arrest by the Nazis. So my parents and I fled to England, where we spent the war. Among my first memories are those of sitting with our neighbors during the air raids, huddled together in a shelter while enemy bombers flew overhead, waiting for the all clear to sound. Our anxieties were heightened because the war in Europe had not begun well, and it seemed that we, who had found refuge in Great Britain, might be left to fight alone. But then one day, wonderful news came from across the sea. A brave nation had answered the call and was on its way to rescue freedom. Soon, American soldiers arrived in England, bringing with them their boundless energy, confident wisecracks, and funny way of walking. On the streets of British cities and towns, children like me trailed along behind them in awe of their uniforms and all that they represented. Then in early June 1944, the troops were suddenly nowhere to be seen. Operation Overlord, the largest amphibious landing in history, had been launched. In the months that followed, almost an entire continent lost to evil had to be taken village by village, hill by hill. It was an assault carried out against dug-in positions amid rain and mud and blood and darkness, winnable only through unbelievable courage and at unbearable loss. In those days, the entire spectrum of human possibility was on display, from the soulless horror of Buchenwald and Auschwitz to the selfless bravery of Allied warriors. My father, who also volunteered to serve as an air raid warden, was head of broadcasting for Czechoslovak government in exile. As the fighting progressed, he reported each breakthrough to the millions of people back home, secretly listening in their cellars and attics. I still remember celebrating the Allied victory, and for the first time, but not the last, falling in love with Americans in uniform. Reflecting on the meaning of VE Day, the historian Henry Steele Commager once described how America and its allies were able to defeat the Axis powers so decisively. He said, "Their courage was a match for the force of the enemy, their ingenuity for his cunning, their free industry for his slavery, their faith for his cynicism." Courage, ingenuity, faith, and industry, these are the hallmarks of World War II generation. And in the 70 years since VE Day, we have cherished seeing the veterans of World War II display these qualities at picnics, at parades, on honor flights, and in schools. We have seen the pride they have taken in their medals and ribbons, and many of us have thought, perhaps, what a fine thing it must have been to be tested in a great cause and to have prevailed. But as this memorial reminds us, behind each medal and ribbon, there is a story of heroism, yes, but also profound sadness. For World War II reflected not only the height of human spirit, but also the depths. So today, we are here to honor those veterans from that generation with us here today. We remember the more than 180,000 American troops who gave their last full measure in the campaign to liberate Europe. We paid tribute to the heavy sacrifices made by our allies, including Russia, which lost more than 20 million of its own people during its long battle with the Nazis on the Eastern Front. As we reflect and give thanks, we can never forget that we are the recipients of a precious gift from those heroes whose consciences could not accept the theft of liberty or the reality of aggression and genocide. For if we are to be true to these heroes today, we must never forget why World War II was fought and how it was won. We must maintain solidarity with one another, never allowing our differences to interfere with the most profound values we share. And we must be willing to uphold that principle by defending democratic institutions and values throughout the world. In the weeks after VE Day, I returned to Czechoslovakia with my family. Because of the fighting was over, my parents and I did our best to settle in and resume a normal life. But within a couple of years, the government of Czechoslovakia was taken over by communists. Once again, my family forced into exile, this time sailing across the ocean to a new and welcoming home. I will forever be grateful for the warm reception we received in the United States and for the opportunity I had to grow up in a country that cherished freedom. And I will always be mindful that this opportunity only came about because of the millions of American men and women who worked and fought to achieve the historic victory we commemorate today. I cannot tell you how grateful I am that I am able to say thank you once more to all of those who brought VE Day about, above all, the veterans here with us this morning. You have our eternal respect and deepest admiration. May God bless you all, and thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for the official wreath laying at the Freedom Wall. Representing the United States of America is Kathy Silva, accompanied by World War II veteran Mr. Les Jones. Representing the National Park Service and Friends of the National World War II Memorial are Superintendent of the National Mall and Memorial Parks, Karen Cucarulo, and the Chairman of the Board for Friends of the National World War II Memorial, Mr. Josiah Bunting III, and World War II veteran Mr. Ewing Miller. Representing the country of Australia is Brigadier David Krieg, Australian military attaché. He is accompanied by World War II veteran Mrs. Barbara Martin. Representing the country of Belarus is Charge d'Affaires of Belarus in the United States, Pavel Shidlovsky. Accompanying the Charge d'Affaires is Mr. Nick Yatrin. Representing the country of Belgium is Councillor William de Bates. Accompanying His Excellency is World War II veteran Mr. Clarence Kai Faulkner. Representing the country of Brazil is Secretary Rafael Tosti Vieira. He is accompanied by Holocaust survivor Mr. Stephen Fenvies. Representing the country of Canada, Deputy Head of Mission Dennis Stevens, accompanied by World War II veteran Mr. James T. Mills. Representing the country of the Czech Republic is Deputy Chief of Mission Jaroslav Zajcek and the World War II veteran Mr. Nazim Abdul Karim. Representing the country of Denmark is Deputy Chief of Mission Lars Bo Moller. He is accompanied by World War II veteran Mr. Les Wheeler. Representing the country of France is French Army Colonel Louis Mison. He is accompanied by Holocaust survivor Mr. Alex Schiffman Shiloh, who lived in France during the war. Representing the country of Georgia is His Excellency Ambassador Archel Gagenshizi. He is accompanied by World War II veteran Mr. Phil Boccaccio. Representing the country of Greece is Defense Attaché of Greece, Colonel Evangelos Papadopoulos. World War II veteran Mr. Nicholas J. Zuras. Representing the country of Kazakhstan is Deputy Chief of Missions Yerkin Akinzanov. Accompanying him is World War II veteran and chairman of the OSS Society, Ambassador Hugh Montgomery. Representing the country of the Kyrgyz Republic is Minister Counselor Mohammed Lu and World War II veteran Mr. Robert Zimmerman. Representing the country of Luxembourg, His Excellency John Louis Wolfsfeld, and World War II veteran Mr. Stanley Calkins. Representing the country of Malta is Deputy Chief of Mission Dr. Patricia Borg and Holocaust survivor Mr. Manny Mandel. Representing the Republic of Moldova is His Excellency Igor Montanu and World War II veteran and Tuskegee Airman Colonel Charles McGee. Representing the country of the Netherlands is Deputy Chief of Mission Miss Joanke Balvoort and Holocaust survivor Ms. Louise Lawrence Israels, who is originally from the Netherlands. Representing the country of New Zealand is Defense Attaché Commodore Keating and World War II veteran Mr. Harry Miller. Representing the country of Norway is Major General Finn Christian Hanstad and World War II veteran Mr. J. Jarvis Taylor. Representing the country of Poland is Defense, Military, Naval, and Air Attaché Brigadier General Yaroslav Strojzik and Chaplain Colonel Gary Studniewski and Holocaust survivor from Poland, Miss Helena Peabody. Representing the country of Russia is Mr. Maxim Bykov, acting military attaché. Accompanying him is World War II veteran Mr. Mikhail Pinsky. Representing the country of Slovakia is Deputy Chief of Mission Peter Zelenak. Accompanying him is a veteran of the Women Air Force Service Pilots, Miss Florence Schutze Reynolds. Representing the country of South Africa is Ambassador Mninwa Malangu. Accompanying him is World War II veteran Mr. Clarence Bud Anderson. Representing the country of Turkmenistan is Ambassador Miray Orazov and World War II veteran Mr. Clarence Walters. Representing the country of Ukraine is Charge d'Affaires Mr. Yaroslav Bryswik, accompanied by World War II veteran Mikhail Kogan. Representing the United Kingdom is Major General Richard Cripwell, who is accompanied by Mr. Alex Kershaw and World War II veteran Mr. John Nair. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the playing of taps. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. At this time, we will be playing the service songs. If you are a veteran or presently serving in our armed forces, please stand when you hear your service song is played. Ladies and gentlemen, the Armed Forces Medley.
The United States Coast Guard. The United States Marine Corps. The United States Army. The United States Navy.
We hope you enjoy today's ceremony.
Good afternoon, veterans and families and honored guests and all who share an interest in the history of our great nation. Welcome, one and all, to the Arsenal of Democracy World War II Capitol Victory Flyover. My name is Rob Ryder. I'm an air show announcer, and I, along with you, are here to commemorate victory in World War II. And it is fitting that we do this today on the 70th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day, VE Day. Today, you will see history pass before your eyes. As I speak, more than 50 vintage World War II aircraft are circling over Virginia, just outside Washington. And within the next few minutes, they'll start flying down the Potomac River in groups of 2 and 3 and 4. Then, at about 2-minute intervals, those small groups of aircraft, most of them traveling at speeds approaching 190 miles per hour, will take a left turn at the Lincoln Memorial and pass by us to the south. Watch closely, because as they pass, most of the aircraft will be visible for just 20 to 25 seconds. Before we get started, we'd like to briefly recognize those who have made this event possible. First, many thanks to the honorary co-chairman of today's event, President George H.W. Bush, the Honorable Bob Dole, and the Honorable John Dingell. Thanks also to the Honorary Congressional Committee chaired by Senator James Inhofe and Congressman Sam Graves. The event would not have been possible without the efforts of 5 organizations: the Commemorative Air Force, the General Aviation Manufacturers Association, the International Council of Air Shows, the National Air Traffic Controllers Association, and the Texas Flying Legends Museum. The level of interagency cooperation required to plan and conduct today's flyover has been remarkable. We're here today because of the hard work and focused efforts of the Federal Aviation Administration, Transportation Security Administration, National Park Service, Secret Service, Park Police, Capitol Police, and D.C. Metro Police. We've also been fortunate to work closely with 3 other organizations to plan for our event: the Friends of the National World War II Memorial, the National Air and Space Museum, and Smithsonian Air and Space Magazine. Special thanks to Air and Space Magazine for their help in preparing the description of the flyover you'll see here today. Many thanks also to Smithsonian Air and Space Magazine for the spotter cards that they produced and made available to all of you. Produced to mimic spotter cards created in World War II to help citizens distinguish between friendly and enemy aircraft, they'll help you this afternoon to recognize each type of aircraft as they make their way down the mall. And finally, we'd like to recognize the generous support of our corporate sponsors. Several companies recognized the historic nature of this unprecedented event and made significant financial commitments to our flyover. In particular, many thanks for the leadership demonstrated by Honeywell Aerospace, Northrop Grumman, General Electric, and the Triumph Group. We are also honored to welcome nearly 500 men who put on the uniform of their country 3/4 of a century ago to defend freedom. Military veterans of the Second World War from the Army Air Forces, the Navy, the Marine Corps, Coast Guard, and Merchant Marine. This event was conceived in large part to recognize the contributions they made to ultimate victory in Europe and the Pacific. Several of those veterans will actually be on board aircraft participating in the flyover. Urban Rajoy was a B-17 pilot for the Army Air Forces in World War II. He is now 96 years old and still an active bush pilot in Alaska. He drove here from Alaska by himself and will be on board of one of the B-17s. Rear Admiral Edward Whitey Faitner shot down 9 enemy aircraft flying F-4F Wildcats and F-6F Hellcats for the Navy. Today he'll be flying in one of the AT-6 Texans that comes by early in the flyover. Al Tucker flew the P-38 Lightning in Europe during World War II before being shot down over Germany on his 22nd combat mission. He spent the last several months of the war as a prisoner of the Germans. Mr. Tucker will be in one of the Stearman biplanes during today's flyover. Weldon Britton lives in Haymarket, Virginia, but in 1945 he was a P-51 Mustang pilot based in the Pacific Theater and he'll be participating in the flyover as a passenger in one of our B-17 Flying Fortresses. Also with us today on the ground are 4 veterans who participated in a discussion forum last night at the National Air and Space Museum. Many thanks to Bud Anderson, Charles McGee, Chester Finnegan, and Carnegie Tamasian for joining us last night and again here this afternoon. But as grateful as we are for their bravery, sacrifice, and service, we're here to celebrate not just G.I. Joe, but Rosie the Riveter as well. In a speech that he made in December of 1940, President Franklin Roosevelt recognized that the great arsenal of democracy would play a pivotal role in our country's anticipated involvement in the war that was already raging across much of the globe. President Roosevelt understood the raw power of the United States and its people when they focused their will and resources on a single common goal. He knew that once this country became involved in hostilities, the immense U.S. industrial complex would transition from peacetime manufacturer of automobiles, tractors, bicycles, and airliners to the wartime production of jeeps, tanks, machine guns, and warplanes. And he was right. For the second time in less than a quarter of a century, the American people were called on to help save the world from the forces of tyranny and oppression. And in the battlefields of Europe, the waters of the South Pacific, and the factories throughout this great country of ours, they responded to that challenges as Americans always have. In the intervening years, the stories of what those brave Americans did and how they did it have been told less and less frequently. In the schools and the history books in our schools, the narrative of World War II has been reduced to a few paragraphs or a day or two of instruction. Those stories deserve more. Americans should know that not so very long ago, our way of life, our freedom, and the fate of much of the world hung in the balance. And the resolve with which this country rose to that challenge is, even 70 years later, quite remarkable. Over the last several months, as we prepared for this commemoration of VE Day and the historic flyover that will begin in just a few minutes, several themes emerged. First, everyone participated, if not in uniform, then working in the factories, building the machines, and producing the munitions and supplies that our boys put to such effective use on dozens of different battlefields around the world. Second, there is a genuine, heartfelt humility among these men who willingly walked into harm's way to protect and defend this country. As recently as yesterday evening, I've had a personal hero of mine tell me, and a small group of people, that he was just doing his job. And finally, and most poignantly, the deep respect that the veterans here with us today have for those they consider to be the real heroes of World War II, those men who didn't come home, the warriors who gave their last full measure of devotion to the epic struggle that took place 7 decades ago in faraway places like Burma, Bataan, and Bastogne, like Carentan, Cassino, and the Coral Sea, and like Tinian, Tunisia, and Tarawa. Today, it is our challenge and our great honor to use a remarkable collection of vintage military aircraft to tell their stories. We'll start the arsenal of democracy with the airplanes that taught our boys to fly, the trainers. In 1938, when General Hap Arnold, who was the commander of the U.S. Army Air Forces, considered this country's preparedness for war, he recognized that America did not have nearly enough airplanes or pilots to fly them. 3 years before the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, the U.S. Army Air Forces was comprised of 21,000 airmen and only 1,800 aircraft. But by the end of the war, the Army Air Forces included 2.3 million people, and production of aircraft of all types reached nearly 300,000. In a war that military leaders learned would be determined by air superiority, this unprecedented, almost inconceivable increase in American air power was widely recognized to be one of the most important factors in the Allies' victory. But 3 years before Pearl Harbor, that challenge had not yet been solved, and the United States was looking at an immense disparity between what it had and what it would soon need. So, drawing on the expertise of prominent aviation leaders, the military created what would become the Civilian Pilot Training Program. By the time the program ended, it had trained 435,000 pilots, including Senator John Glenn, the nation's top ace, Richard Bong, and one of our guests here today, Triple Ace Colonel Bud Anderson. Now, ladies and gentlemen, approaching are the trainers. All U.S. military pilots completed a training program that was accomplished in 3 phases: primary, basic, and advanced. These future aviation warriors learned to fly in a wide variety of aircraft, among them the Grasshoppers, the L-Birds, like the Aeronca's L-16 Champ, the Piper L-4, better known as the Piper Cub. Here they come now.
Ladies and gentlemen, those in the plaza standing, please kneel down or find a seat so you're not blocking the view of people behind you. Thank you.
In addition to serving as training aircraft, all of these planes had wartime functions as observation, reconnaissance, and liaison aircraft. One Army Air Force pilot recorded 6 confirmed kills of German tanks while flying a Piper L-4 Grasshopper outfitted with a bazooka. These 2 aircraft flying over a part of that L-Bird gaggle. All nicknamed Grasshoppers and all having a top speed of a blistering 90 to 95 miles an hour. All U.S. military pilots that completed a training program that was accomplished in 3 phases. Primary, basic, and advanced. This process was designed to gradually increase the complexity of a pilot's training. One of the iconic trainers was the Boeing Stearman biplane, an open cockpit aircraft constructed of wood, fabric, and tubular steel. There were more than 24 different variants of the Stearman and more than 10,000 built. Used also by the RCAF, it earned another well-known nickname, the Cadet. These are the Stearman biplanes. Primary training introduced cadets to the principles of flight. Basic training introduced them to the complexities of radio communication and flying in formation. And advanced training was designed to prepare the air crews to go into combat. Another primary trainer was the Fairchild PT-19, a monoplane that was used by the Army Air Forces, the British Royal Air Force, and the Royal Canadian Air Force. Like the Stearman, the PT-19 was an open cockpit design. Advanced training was accomplished in aircraft like the North American AT-6 Texan, weighing in at nearly 3 tons with a 600 horsepower radial engine and retractable landing gear. The T-6 was designed to prepare pilots to fly state-of-the-art aircraft that they would use in combat. By the end of the war, North American aviation had built more than 15,000 Texans, including the AT-6 variant for the Army Air Forces and the SNJ version for the U.S. Navy. When World War II began, the Bendix Corporation was a big name in aviation. The company built radios for both the B-25 Mitchell bomber and the P-40 Warhawk fighter. Bendix also manufactured the ball turrets for the B-25. The company is now Bendix King, which is a part of Honeywell Aviation, one of our sponsors of the Arsenal of Democracy Flyover. There was perhaps no single company that made a bigger contribution to America's success in World War II in the air than the Grumman Corporation. Grumman designed and built the F-4F Wildcat and the F-6F Hellcat fighters and the TBF Avenger torpedo bomber, all planes that were essential to our country's success in naval battles in the Pacific. In 1994, the company merged with Northrop Corporation to form Northrop Grumman, a lead sponsor of today's Arsenal of Democracy Flyover. We'll see several Grumman planes in the formation flyovers today. When the Triumph Group acquired Vought Aircraft Industries several years ago, they acquired a part of aviation and World War II history. Chance Vought built the F-4U Corsair, a critical tool in the war against Japan, and after several name changes and acquisitions, the company that was once Chance Vought is now part of the Triumph Group, a sponsor of today's flyover. General Electric Company was a vital part of the American arsenal of democracy. In addition to groundbreaking research and development of the first jet engine designed in the United States, GE pioneered the development and integration of turbochargers into aircraft engines. Many thanks to GE for also being a sponsor of today's flyover. In just a moment, the T-6 flight will be coming over. The Texans, also used by the Royal Canadian Air Force and the Royal Air Force, they called it the Harvard. It was indeed an aircraft of higher learning. Here come the Texans, the 600 horsepower, 2 flights of 4. Listen to the sound that they make as they go over. There were also multi-engine trainers. One was known as the AT-11 Kansan, built by Beechcraft. Also had a light cargo designation of C-45. The Twin Beech, as it was known in civilian life, also served many functions, including as a training platform for bombing, navigation, and gunnery. With 2 450 horsepower Pratt & Whitney engines, it'll have a great sound all its own. Look over the memorial, it's inbound now. Ladies and gentlemen, the AT-11, the Twin Beech. Inbound right now are 2 Curtiss P-40 Warhawks, a 1937 design that at the time of Pearl Harbor was our #1 fighter in the Pacific. Directly to our left, the 2 Curtiss P-40 Warhawks, with Allison V12 engines in them, liquid-cooled. In April of 1942, after a series of stinging setbacks in the Pacific, Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle led 16 B-25 Mitchell bombers off the USS Hornet on a bombing raid to Tokyo and 4 other cities. The raid was American improvisation at its finest. The B-25 wasn't designed to fly from an aircraft carrier, and an American strike on the heartland of Japan so soon after the attack on Pearl Harbor provided Americans with a much-needed boost in morale. Although the raid resulted in only minor damage to its targets, it had a profound impact on Japanese strategy, causing military leaders to be more concerned about attacks on Japan than they otherwise would be. The two surviving Doolittle raiders, Dick Cole and Dave Thatcher, commemorated the 73rd anniversary of the raid just last month. Ladies and gentlemen, 3 B-25 Mitchell bombers, 2 of them B-25s, one actually in Marine Corps PBJ-1 livery. In early June of 1942, as the Japanese and American navies converged on a tiny volcanic island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, the stage was set for a dramatic shift in the momentum of the Pacific theater. Tipped off to Japanese plans by U.S. cryptographers who had broken Japanese radio codes, PBY Catalina flying boats were deployed from Midway Island to search hundreds of miles of ocean for enemy ships. One of them found the Japanese fleet steaming toward Midway and radioed the information to American military planners. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the PBY Catalina. From 3 U.S. carriers, Wildcat fighters flew escort for slower Devastator and Dauntless bombers, but logistical problems and bad luck plagued Americans as they began their attack. Most of the American torpedo bombers were shot out of the sky. In the first 3 hours of the battle, not a single U.S. bomb or torpedo hit a Japanese ship, despite 8 separate attacks by a total of 94 airplanes. Then the tide turned. As the Japanese focused their attention on the torpedo bombers flying just off the surface of the water, SBD Dauntless dive bombers attacked from a higher altitude, fatally damaging 3 of 4 Japanese carriers. An hour later, a second attack by dive bombers destroyed the 4th Japanese carrier. The balance of naval power in the Pacific had shifted permanently. We're right now awaiting the SBD Dauntlesses and the FM-2 Wildcats. Wildcats were designed by Grumman as the F-4F, but were also produced in great numbers by General Motors under the designation FM-2 Wildcat. The Wildcat and the Dauntless. When the U.S. Marines stormed the shores of Guadalcanal in August of 1942, Japanese conquests had reached their peak. This bold, unexpected offensive would prove to be a critical turning point in the war in the Pacific. A small but strategic airfield on the island was the focal point of 6 months of fierce battles on the ground, in the air, and on the sea. And by the time the Japanese conceded the island in February of 1943, nearly 25,000 Japanese and 1,600 Americans had been killed, with thousands more dead from malaria and other tropical diseases. Central to the battle was the venerable Grumman F-4F Wildcat, which operated from carriers by U.S. Navy pilots and from Henderson Field by Marine Corps pilots throughout the Guadalcanal campaign. Although badly outmatched by the faster and more agile Mitsubishi Zero, the Wildcats of Guadalcanal's Cactus Air Force were able to hold their own because of their rugged construction and the unique battle tactics developed by the naval aviators who flew them. By the end of 1943, the first Grumman F-6F Hellcats, a new and far superior Grumman fighter, were being deployed to the Pacific theater. But during the early critical battles in the Pacific in 1942 and 43, it was the Wildcat that shouldered the burden as America's principal carrier-based fighter. The Wildcats that you'll see here today are both the FM2 variant built by General Motors during the last years of the war and deployed on smaller escort carriers for anti-submarine and picket duty. Interestingly, pilots of the Wildcats have told me that rather than flipping a switch to raise the landing gear, after they took off, they maintained about 90 or 95 miles an hour, put their left hand on the stick instead of the right hand, and took the right hand and had to crank the landing gear up 29 turns to get it up. It was not a fun airplane in the pattern. Ladies and gentlemen, here come the Wildcats. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto was commander-in-chief of the Japanese combined fleet and mastermind behind Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor. In the spring of 1943, American codebreakers intercepted and decoded a message with Yamamoto's itinerary for an airplane trip between two islands in the Solomon Islands area of the South Pacific. On April 18th, a flight of 18 Lockheed P-38 Lightnings was dispatched from Cookham Field on Guadalcanal on a long, low-altitude circuitous route designed to evade enemy radar and maximize the element of surprise. Here comes the fork-tailed devil, the P-38 Lightning, which shot down Yamamoto's plane. The mission named Operation Vengeance not only avenged the deaths of 2,400 Americans at Pearl Harbor, but it also deprived the Japanese of one of their finest military strategists. Known as Hitler's gas station, Ploiesti was a huge complex of Romanian oil refineries that supplied Germany with more than 1/3 of its fuel. After identifying it as a high-priority target, military strategists initially opted for a single large raid by B-24 bombers attacking from an altitude of just 200 feet. Flying the mission at low altitude would help the Americans avoid enemy radar and increase the accuracy of their bombs, but the low altitude would also put the aircraft and crews at greater risk. The B-24 was selected for the mission because it was the only U.S. bomber that could manage the 2,400-mile round trip from Libya to Ploiesti and back. Though complex and finicky to fly and maintain, the U.S. produced more B-24 bombers than any other. And in 1944, assembly lines rolled out a new one every 58 minutes at plants in San Diego, Fort Worth, Tulsa, and Detroit. But the Americans lost nearly 1/3 of their bombers and 500 airmen during that low-level raid on August 1st of 1943. So military leaders adopted a new strategy of daily raids from a higher altitude with long-range fighter escorts like the P-51 Mustangs, incrementally destroying Ploiesti's production capacity over a period of 14 months. As attacks on the oil refineries of Romania continued during the summer of 1944, American forces pushed into France. Army Air Forces Commander General Hap Arnold noted the increasing number of vehicles along the side of the road that had just run out of gas. Here's the Liberator with the Mustangs. In the early days of the war, after the Allies had decided that the British would conduct nighttime bombing raids on German targets and the Americans would bomb during daylight hours, mission losses were horrific. Without fighter escorts, the U.S. bombers in particular suffered unsustainable losses to German fighters and anti-aircraft flak. By some estimates, the fatality rate of B-17 and B-24 crews was put at nearly 50%. That began to change with the introduction of the P-51 Mustang as a long-range fighter. When outfitted with external fuel tanks made of a kind of paper mache, here come the Mustangs. Mustangs also flown by the 332nd Fighter Group, the Red Tail Squadron of the Tuskegee Airmen. By 1944, the German Air Force was struggling to survive. In a single week that February, the Allies sought to hasten the end. Operation Argument, better known as Big Week, was a series of large-scale Royal Air Force and U.S. bombing raids on German aviation factories. On several raids, more than 1,000 bombers were sent against their targets. Together, the Allies dropped over 20 million pounds of ordnance between February 20th and February 25th. The raids were also intended to bait German fighters into the air, where nearly 900 P-47 and P-51 Mustangs engaged them. The German Air Force lost a third of its remaining single-engine fighters that month, and 18% of its pilots. But U.S. forces suffered as well. In more than 3,000 sorties, 247 B-17s were lost, despite the bombers' almost uncanny ability to withstand damage and bring our airmen home. Outfitted with 13 .50 caliber machine guns in 8 different locations on the plane, the 10-member crews of the B-17 flew this aircraft, earning the nickname Flying Fortress, with the ability to fly long distances with a bomb payload of about 6,000 pounds. These 4-engine aircraft were the workhorse of America's strategic bombing campaign in Europe. Four 1,200 horsepower motors allowed the B-17 to lumber at high altitudes, but it was not a pressurized aircraft. When they had to fly up where it was cold, literally, crew members wore suits that had electric wires in them to keep them warm. They wore oxygen masks, and they would come back from missions with marks on their faces from frostbite that was created from being such high altitude and such low temperatures. In all, over 12,700 B-17s were built, remaining flying today anywhere in the world, somewhere around a dozen. It's part of the reason that we love to see these airplanes fly. So few are still in existence today. The P-51 Mustang long-range fighters had a production total of somewhere in the neighborhood of 15,000, and about 160 are still flyable around the world today. Now we're still waiting for the 2 B-17 bombers that will be coming across here very, very shortly. They were part of our heavy bomber fleet along with the B-24 Liberator we saw fly by earlier. There were about 18,000 B-24 Liberators made, more than any other American aircraft during the war. Here come the the first B-17 and the second. The Flying Fortress, 10 crew members in each aircraft. The first Allied soldiers in France on D-Day arrived by parachute just after midnight on June 6, 1944. 13,000 paratroopers from the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions made the trip in more than 800 C-47 transport aircraft. These lead elements jumped into Normandy to secure a series of bridges, causeways, and crossroads vital to the success of the Allied invasion of France. The C-47 began its life as the Douglas DC-3, an airplane credited with revolutionizing the airline industry. And with the outbreak of hostilities, the plane was reconfigured as a military transport. C-47s kept in China in the war flew supplies, fuel, and weapons and personnel from muddy airfields in India across the Himalayan range to bases in China. It was called flying the hump. After D-Day, the C-47 supported the Allied drive into Germany, including flying critical resupply missions to surrounded U.S. forces during the Battle of the Bulge. Here comes the C-47. After 1945, General Dwight D. Eisenhower credited 4 weapons to winning the war: the bazooka, the jeep, the atomic bomb, and the C-47. About 11,000 of those were built, and about 1,100 remain flyable around the world today, some with turbine conversions on their engines. The June 19, 1944 Battle of Leyte Gulf was the largest carrier-to-carrier battle in history. In a flotilla that included 15 aircraft carriers and more than 100 supporting ships, the U.S. Navy arrived to capture the island of Saipan for use as a base for B-29 superfortresses to bomb Japan. By nightfall on the 19th, Japan had lost 2/3 of the 400 carrier aircraft it had committed to the battle. One Hellcat pilot shot down 6 Japanese dive bombers in less than 8 minutes. American losses were 29 aircraft plus a nominal damage to a single battleship. The superiority of U.S. pilots was so dramatic that the battle came to be known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. The battle also included the loss of 11 Japanese ships, including 3 aircraft carriers. The U.S. Navy aircraft attacked enemy ships with Hellcats, Dauntless dive bombers, Grumman TBM Avenger torpedo bombers, and the Curtiss SB-2C Helldiver. What you will see here today are 2 TBM torpedo bombers and a single Curtiss Helldiver, the only Helldiver of over 7,000 built that's still flying today. The battle was decisive and eliminated the Japanese Navy's ability to conduct large-scale carrier operations, giving the U.S. a new level of naval dominance that lasted until the end of the war.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have 2 special guests with us today, 2 special statesmen, 2 veterans, Senator Robert Dole and Senator Warner. They're in the front row. Let's hear it for them.
Ladies and gentlemen, here come the 2 TBM Avengers and the Curtiss Helldiver, nicknamed the Big-Tailed Beast. The Battle of the Bulge was Germany's last major offensive campaign in World War II. It began in mid-December of 1944 as a surprise attack on American forces in the Ardennes area of Belgium. Before it was over, the battle would involve more than 500,000 Germans, 600,000 Americans, and 50,000 British troops. Characterized initially by cold temperatures and overcast skies, the battle demonstrated how thoroughly air support had been integrated into contemporary military operations. The Allies' inability to dominate the skies over the battlefield prolonged the German offensive. And conversely, the return of air support helped the Allies achieve victory in the battle. It began on December 16th with a German attack designed to catch the Allies unaware and split their forces in half. The Germans wanted to capture the Belgian harbor of Antwerp. That initial offensive against unprepared American defenses created a large 80-mile wide bulge in the Allied lines. One of the aircraft that drove the Germans back was the A-26 Invader, built by Douglas. Immortalized forever by the photo of Marines raising the U.S. flag over Mount Suribachi, the Battle of Iwo Jima helped to secure 3 airfields and provided the United States with an important staging area for the much-anticipated invasion of the Japanese homeland. It is a testament to the ferocity of the fighting on Iwo Jima that more than 25,000 U.S. Marines were killed or wounded during 35 days of fighting in February and March of 1945. And nearly 19,000 Japanese soldiers were killed. The only battle of the war in which U.S. casualties exceeded Japanese. The chance-fought F-4U Corsair was critical to the American success on Iwo Jima. Initially designed as a carrier-based fighter, the pilot sat far back in the fuselage, and his view was restricted because of the 2,000 horsepower motor, the 13-foot-plus diameter propeller, and a huge fuel tank, making landings extremely challenging on the pitching deck of a carrier. So early models went to land-based Marine pilots who put the aircraft's speed and heavy armament to effective use in both dogfights and ground support. Eventually, Corsair pilots shot down 11 Japanese aircraft for every Corsair lost, and by the beginning of 1945, Marine Corps pilots were flying low-level missions with bombs, rockets, and napalm in support of their fellow Marines on the beaches and in the jungles of the small islands throughout the South Pacific, including Iwo Jima. The Japanese called this airplane Whistling Death. Some of you remember VMA 214, the Black Sheep Squadron, led by Pappy Boyington. They called him Pappy because he was older than the rest of the guys in the squadron. He was 28. He also racked up 28 kills during his career. Ladies and gentlemen, from the right and directly in front of you all, here come the F-4U Corsair, the Bent Wing Bird. The B-29 Super Fortress, built by Boeing, could carry 20,000 pounds of bombs and targets to more than 2,000 miles away. At an altitude of 30,000 feet, it was able to fly above most of Japan's home island defenses. Instead of conventional gun turrets, the B-29's weapons poked from sealed blisters on the fuselage, linked through a remote control system that was a marvel of technology in the 1940s. By the time B-29s entered the war, an earlier generation of heavy bombers had leveled much of Germany, so the super forces were deployed to China and later to Tinian in the Marianas Islands. The move to the islands put the aircraft to within 1,500 miles of Tokyo, well within the bombers' range. With their large numbers and vast payloads, it wasn't long before the B-29s had destroyed nearly every strategic target in Japan. The only aircraft then capable of delivering the world's first nuclear bombs, modified superforces joined their standard comrades on Tinian in the early summer of 1945. On August 6th, the B-29 Enola Gay dropped a uranium bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. 3 days later, Boxcar destroyed Nagasaki with a plutonium bomb. On August 14th, Japanese surrendered unconditionally. The surrender was formalized in a ceremony on board the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay on September 2nd of 1945. Compared to the 12,000 plus B-17s and 18,000 plus Liberators that were built, production of the B-29 Super Fortress was about 4,000. It was rushed into service. It was fraught with engine problems so great that engines were routinely swapped out after only 25 hours of flying time. Just shy of 4,000 B-29 Superfortresses were built by Boeing and also by Bell. And also Martin Aircraft. The ability for the B-29 to fly at such high altitudes is because it was the first U.S. aircraft that was pressurized, enabling the aircrew to be operating the aircraft in normal kinds of temperatures. Ladies and gentlemen, here comes the B-29. Over 12 million Americans answered the nation's call over the course of the Second World War. We are going to have now what is known as a missing man formation. It serves to remind us of those who sacrificed their future for that of our nation, and it's a tradition which dates back to World War II. The symbolic moment when a single aircraft breaks formation and soars skyward, leaving behind his comrades in arms. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please help us recognize our fallen heroes and stand while taps is being played. Ladies and gentlemen, you may be seated. Thanks to the Texas Flying Legends for performing the missing man formation. 70 years ago, the world rejoiced, ladies and gentlemen. London's Trafalgar Square was the scene of an immense impromptu street party. Joyful Frenchmen celebrated on the Champs-Élysées in Paris, and vast crowds gathered in Moscow's Red Square. The United States, although the country knew there was still much work to be done in the Pacific, huge celebrations were held in Chicago, Los Angeles, Miami, and especially New York's Times Square. Every contributor to the arsenal of democracy had done their part, from the servicemen fighting for their country overseas, to the factory workers and businesses providing those servicemen with the weapons of war so vital to their success, to the families who went without so that the boys overseas could have all that they needed. Victory was a collaborative effort, a triumph that the entire country could be proud of. And 7 decades later, we are no less proud. For all those here today who played a role in America's victory in World War II, whether in military or civilian capacity, thank you for your service. For everybody else, thank you for joining us here today to commemorate our country's victory in World War II and recognize the men and women who made it possible. Many thanks once again to the government agencies that helped make today's flyover possible, to the nonprofit organizations that helped to plan and conduct this historic event, to the pilots participating in the flyover, and especially to our sponsors, including General Electric, Honeywell Aerospace, Triumph Group, and Northrop Grumman. My name is Rob Ryder, and it has been my distinct pleasure to spend time with you here today and commemorate the U.S. victory in World War II. Travel safely, and when you have the opportunity, be sure to thank a vet. As a guardian on an honor flight a few years back, I was handed a T-shirt. I wanted to wear a collared shirt. They said, no, you'll wear the T-shirt. I looked at the back of the T-shirt, and it says, if you can read this, thank a teacher. If you can read this in English, thank a vet. God bless you all, and God bless America.